Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the entirety of the Olympic team for their fantastic achievements at the Olympics in Rio? Wish the Paralympic team all the very best. And can she tell us, did this set the visit off to China in a good way, or was there a bit of tension there when bragging rights are allowed? Mr. Speaker, the average house price in Britain is now £215,000, over 8 times the average wage. The average price of a first-time buyer's home has risen by 12% in the past year. Isn't the dream of a home ownership for many people just that, a dream?
First of all, in response to the first point that the Right Honourable gentleman made, President Xi congratulated me on the United Kingdom's success in the Olympic Games. He raises the issue of housing, which he's raised on a number of occasions with my predecessor, but also with me before the summer recess. And I will say simply this: of course, it is important for us to look at helping people get their first rung, their step on that first rung of the housing ladder, and ensuring that people are able to have the home that they want. That's why I'm pleased that house building has been up under a Conservative government compared to a Labour government, but we're not complacent. That's why we will be doing more to see more houses built under this Conservative government, and also continue to provide support for people to ensure that they have that financial support that helps them to own their own home.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, house building under this government is 45,000 a year less than it was under the last Labour government. And for those who are desperate to get their own place, I just refer the Prime Minister to a note I received from a lady called Jenny, whose partner and herself work in a supermarket, earning £7.37 an hour each. They're trying to get a mortgage, and they've been told they can borrow £73,000. Not much hope for them then. The former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Witney, promised that there would be a one-for-one replacement for every council house that is sold under right to buy. Sadly, the reality is there's only one for every 5 that are sold. Will the Prime Minister give us a commitment on the one-for-one replacement, and when it will be a reality?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, can I say to Jenny that I fully understand and appreciate the concerns that individuals have about wanting to be able to have their own home and to set up that home, and I fully recognise the difficulties that there are for some people in doing that. I have to say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that actually, in relation to the figures on council houses, he's wrong. We have delivered on the one-for-one replacement on the right to buy. But I'm very interested because I did notice that the Right Honourable Gentleman had asked all his Twitter followers what questions he should ask me this week. So I thought I would look to see what sort of responses he'd received. I have to say that the first one was quite good. In fact, he might want to make sure he stays sitting down for this. Lewis writes, "Does she know that in a recent poll on who would make a better Prime Minister, Don't Know scored higher than Jeremy Corbyn?" Mr. Speaker, what we do know is that whoever wins the Labour Party leadership, we're not going to let them anywhere near power again.
Mr. Speaker, the number of first-time buyers has halved in the last 20 years, and their average age has increased a great deal. There is a housing crisis in Britain. 10 million people now live in the private rented sector, many forced to claim housing benefit to cover costs of rents. Devastating figures released over this summer show that £9.3 billion of public money is paid through housing benefit directly into the pockets of private landlords. Does the Prime Minister think this £9.3 billion into the private rentals market is really money well spent?
I
Prime Minister.
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that he starts off talking about the importance of people actually being able to be in their own homes, and then challenges one of the measures that actually helps people to get into their own homes through housing benefit support in the private rented sector. So it may be that he just has an ideological objection to the private rented sector. What I say is what this government is doing is ensuring that what we are doing is looking across the board. So we will see more houses being built. We are looking to ensure that there is a diversity of opportunity for people in terms of getting their own home. But I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that everything that he says just tells us all we need to know about modern Labour. The train's left the station, the seats are all empty, the leader's on the floor, even on rolling stock they're a laughing stock.
Mr. Speaker, her predecessor, in discussing this issue, said the simple point is that every penny you spend on housing subsidy is money you cannot spend on building houses. And if landlords rent out houses in a very bad state, such as heavy, damp, wet walls, no working toilet, they need to be getting a fine. The government has to regulate. That's what Joyce wrote to me. And the Citizens Advice Bureau says 1/6 of housing benefit goes to private sector landlords renting out unsafe homes. Does the Prime Minister think this really is a satisfactory state of affairs?
I say to the right honourable gentleman that if he thinks that housing benefit is actually such a bad thing, why was it that when we changed the rules on housing benefit, the Labour Party opposed those changes that we took place? Now, we have changed. He talks about bad landlords. We have changed the rules on selective licensing. We are making changes. We've given councils free rein to impose burdensome bureaucracy on landlords giving councils free rein to impose burdensome bureaucracy would lead, we think, to problems within the market, which would actually lead to higher costs for both tenants and landlords. We're introducing new regulations in relation to housing in multiple occupation. So we are looking at all of these issues. I recognise, as every member of Parliament in this House will, the problems that people sometimes have when they are living in accommodation that is not up to the standard that we would all wish to see people living in. That's why we are changing the rules, and we are ensuring that the regulations are there.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that's extremely interesting, Mr. Speaker, because only a year ago the Prime Minister voted against a Labour amendment to the housing bill which quite simply said all homes for rent in the private rented sector should be fit for human habitation. And just over a year ago, the Treasury estimated that it is losing £500 million per year on unpaid tax from landlords renting in the private rented sector. So we have it, £9.5 billion in housing benefit, £500 million not being collected, a very large number of homes not really fit for human habitation. Doesn't this require government intervention on the side of the tenants and those in housing need?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman asks for the government to intervene. The government has, through the Housing and Planning Act, introduced further tough measures, civil penalties, banning orders for serious offences, extending rent repayment orders. We've provided money so local authorities can conduct more inspections of properties, of people's homes. We have seen more properties being inspected. We now see thousands of landlords facing further action. So far from not taking action in this area, the government has. But I say to the right honourable gentleman this: he may have a model of society where he doesn't want to see private landlords, where he wants to see the government owning everything, the government deliberating on everything, the government doing everything for everybody. That is not what we want. We want opportunities for people. We want to help them to take those opportunities. It's a big difference between him and me.
Of course we all recognise there is a mixed housing economy, but we want to make sure that those living in the private rented sector are properly treated and not having to pay excessive levels of rent. Women's Aid, Mr. Speaker, has said that 2/3 of women refuges are going to close because of the benefit cap when it comes into force, and that 87% of women and children who are in those refuges will suffer as a result of it, and that most of those refuges require an income level that comes mainly from housing benefit. 90% of their income comes from it. Does the Prime Minister recognise these are very vulnerable women in those refuges? Closure of those refuges, it would be devastating for them, very dangerous for the most vulnerable people within our society. Would she take action to make sure that the cap does not apply to Women's Aid refuges in any part of Britain?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman raises a very important issue. On the issue of domestic violence, we should, across this House, be doing all we can to stop these terrible crimes that are taking place, and obviously to provide support to the victims and survivors of these crimes. That's why we are working on exempting refugees from the cap in relation to what he speaks about. But I would also remind him of the very good record that we have on domestic violence. It was a Conservative government that introduced the new offence of coercive control, that put into practice the domestic violence protection orders, that introduced Clare's Law, that is putting £80 million into support for domestic violence victims in the run-up to in the period up to 2020. So we are listening to these problems and we are responding to them, and we all take this very seriously indeed. But I say to the right honourable gentleman as well, it's 50 days, I think it is, since he and I last met across this dispatch box. Nice to see you, he says. Well, it's very good to see him sitting in his place. Still. And I have to say, if we just look at the contrast of what's been done over this summer, the Conservative government has been working tirelessly to support everyone in this country. £250 million of loans to small businesses, introduced the racial disparity audit, looking at public services and how they treat people, and of course setting the groundwork for new trade deals around the world. What we've seen, what a contrast. What a contrast with the party opposite, divided amongst themselves and incapable of uniting our country. What we do know is that there is only one party that is going to provide a country, a government, an economy, a society that works for everyone, and that's the Conservative Party.